I never expected to fall for someone who came with so much baggage, but when I met Brian, it didn't feel like baggage at first, it felt like purpose. I was 27, fresh out of a draining long-term relationship, and working as a veterinary tech in a small town outside Atlanta. Brian was 35, charming in that dad who reads parenting blogs kind of way. We met at the local farmer's market. He had his daughter, Ava, with him, this bright-eyed, chatty little girl who insisted on feeding every goat in the petting zoo. I ended up helping her untangle her hair from a fence wire, and Brian gave me this sheepish, grateful smile. That was our beginning. From the start, he made it clear he was a single dad. His ex, Carla, had taken off 2 years prior to find herself and never looked back. He was raising Ava alone. He said it like a badge of honor, like he'd earned every line on his face. I admired that, or maybe I just wanted to believe in it. He told me I was a breath of fresh air. "You're not like the others," he'd say. "You're not scared off by real life." And I wasn't. At first, everything felt like a dream. I wasn't just dating Brian, I was building something. I was packing Ava's lunch for school, teaching her how to braid her hair, going to her dance recitals. She started calling me Mommy one day out of the blue, and when I gently corrected her, Brian just laughed and said, "She knows who's really here for her." That moment melted me. But even then, there were signs. Brian never wanted me to move in, even though I was over 3 or 4 nights a week and practically raising his kid with him. "It's just a lot for Ava," he'd say. "She's still adjusting. Let's take our time." That'd be fair, if not for the way he also left her with me constantly. If he had errands, it was me watching her. If he had to work late, I was the one at school pickup. I wasn't her stepmom, but I was doing the job. I started keeping extra clothes for her at my place, just in case. The weird thing was, Brian wasn't really showing up for me in the same way. I never got real time with just him anymore. We stopped going on dates. If I brought it up, he'd say things like, "You want me to get a sitter so we can watch a movie? That's selfish." Selfish. That word started floating around a lot. I brushed it off at first. Told myself being a parent was hard, and I needed to be patient. I loved Ava. I still do. But there's only so many times you can be told you're asking too much when all you're really asking for is partnership. Then there were the financial red flags. One month, he casually mentioned he was behind on daycare fees. He didn't outright ask me, but it was this loaded silence, like he wanted me to offer. And I did. I paid it. Just once, I told myself. But once turned into twice. And then suddenly I was helping out with grocery runs and Ava's ballet shoes and Brian's new tires, because he couldn't drive her safely without them. Every time I hesitated, he guilted me. "You said you loved us." Well, this is what being a family means. We support each other. But it didn't feel mutual. I wasn't even allowed to leave a toothbrush at his place without him making a comment. One night, I brought it up. Gently. Asked where this was all going. We'd been together over a year. I thought maybe it was time to talk about the future, not marriage or anything wild. Just a shared lease. A drawer. Some kind of direction. He didn't get angry. Worse, he got cold. Shrugged and said, "I just don't think I'm ready for all that. I've already done the serious thing, and look where it got me. I thought you understood I wasn't looking to get locked down again." That sentence stung. Was I just a stand-in until something better came along? A babysitter with benefits? I remember sitting in his driveway that night, my hand on the gear shift, staring at the porch where Ava had drawn a picture of the 3 of us with sidewalk chalk. She called me Mom. I made her birthday cake from scratch. I helped her get through nightmares when she woke up crying for someone who wouldn't come back. And Brian? He wouldn't even let me leave a toothbrush. I should have left right then. But I didn't. I told myself I was staying for Ava, that I couldn't hurt her by disappearing. I told myself Brian was just scared, that love could be complicated, that maybe I was asking for too much. I wasn't. I see that now. But back then, I clung to every breadcrumb he tossed my way, because I wanted it to be real. But things were about to get worse. Way worse. And when the truth finally came out, it wasn't just about Brian not committing. It was about betrayal on a level I wasn't ready for. The first real shift happened on a rainy Thursday. Ava had a school play that night. She was playing a sunflower, complete with a cardboard petal crown. I had helped her glue it together, practiced lines with her in the living room, even took a half day off work so I could be there early to save front row seats. Brian? He bailed an hour before curtain. His excuse was that work had called him in for an emergency inventory audit. I don't know why, but something in his voice felt rehearsed. Cold. Like he was more annoyed to be talking to me than upset about missing his daughter's performance. Still, I smiled for Ava. Cheered the loudest when she did her little wave at the end. But after the play, while all the other kids were running into hugs from both parents, Ava just looked around and said, "Why didn't Daddy come?" I lied. I told her he tried but just couldn't make it, that he was really proud. She didn't say anything. Just nodded quietly and held my hand tighter on the walk back to the car. That night, something snapped in me. I sat in my apartment staring at my phone, reading old texts from Brian, the ones where he called me his rock, said we were building a forever. But those words were all smoke. There was no action behind them. Just me doing everything while he coasted. I called him. Tried to talk about how I was feeling like a placeholder, how Ava deserved consistency, and I deserved honesty. His response? "You always make everything about you, don't you?" I couldn't even breathe for a second. Then he launched into this rant about how tired he was, how I didn't understand the pressure he was under as a single dad, how I was lucky he even made room for me in his life. Lucky. That word stayed with me like a slap. I wasn't lucky. I was used. And once I started to see it, I couldn't unsee it. There were texts he'd hide from me, little glances at his phone followed by a quick flip to silent mode. There were guy nights that went late into the morning, with no explanation and no apology. One night, while he was in the shower, his phone buzzed. I didn't go looking. I swear. But the name lit up on the screen, Tanya. I felt my chest tighten. I picked up the phone, didn't unlock it, just stared at the message preview. Last night was perfect. Same time next week? I froze. When he came out of the shower, towel around his waist, humming like nothing had happened, I didn't confront him. I just watched. Waited. Told myself maybe it was an old friend. Maybe I was reading too much into it. But the next day, I stayed home from work. I sat at my kitchen table, phone in hand, wondering how I'd gotten here. How someone could say they love you and still treat you like furniture, like something that's just supposed to be there when they need it. Later that week, Ava came over to my place for a sleepover. Brian had asked if I could keep her for the weekend. He needed some space. I didn't question it. Ava was extra clingy that night. At bedtime, she asked if I could lay next to her for a while. We were under the covers, and she looked up at me with this little wrinkle in her forehead and said, "Daddy said you're not really my mom, but I wish you were." I swear, I almost broke. I held her close and told her I loved her, and I meant it. But inside, my heart was splitting down the middle. Because I was loving a child who wasn't mine, building a life that wasn't real, and I didn't know how to stay without losing myself, or how to leave without breaking her heart. After she fell asleep, I poured myself a glass of wine and did what I should have done weeks ago. I opened Brian's social media. And there it was, a photo he'd been tagged in. At a bar. Arm around a woman I didn't recognize. Her lips near his cheek. Posted 2 nights ago. The caption? "Love this man. Red heart lucky me. Lucky her, I guess." I didn't comment. Didn't like. I just sat there staring at that smiling face I used to love, wondering how many times he'd told her the same things he told me. How many other women had believed they were building something real with him? I knew the answer before I asked. This wasn't just commitment phobia. This was a pattern. Brian wasn't afraid to love, he was afraid to be held accountable. He liked the idea of someone being there, supporting him, caring for his child, as long as it didn't come with expectations. As long as it didn't cost him anything. And I realized something else, something bitter and heavy. I was never the partner. I was the help. I didn't sleep much after finding that photo. I lay awake, watching Ava's tiny chest rise and fall with each breath as she slept beside me, this innocent kid who had no idea her dad was out playing house with someone else. By morning, my sadness had curdled into something else, clarity. I needed answers. Real ones. Not more dodging or gaslighting or emotional sleight of hand. I wasn't going to accuse, not yet. I was going to give him the rope, and see if he'd hang himself with it. So I waited. Brian came to pick Ava up on Sunday evening. He barely looked at me when he rang the doorbell. He was wearing a leather jacket I hadn't seen before, and he had cologne on, too much of it. Like he'd come from somewhere, or was heading out right after. Ava ran into his arms, and he gave her the usual, "Hey, Peanut," with that big grin. Then his eyes flicked to me. "You good?" he asked, like nothing was wrong. "I'm fine," I said flatly. "We need to talk later." He hesitated, smiled thinly. "Sure. I'll call you." I knew he wouldn't. So I called him the next day. "Brian, who's Tanya?" Silence. Long, loaded silence. Then, "Why are you going through my stuff?" I didn't. I saw a text. On your lock screen. You were in the shower. And you've been tagged in pictures. You're not even trying to hide it anymore. Another pause. Then, his voice took that familiar defensive tone. The one I'd heard whenever he got caught in something he didn't want to explain. "She's just a friend. You're being dramatic." "Oh, really?" "Because your friend said last night was perfect." "Want to explain that?" He sighed, like I was the one exhausting him. "You know what, I can't do this with you. You're always looking for a reason to be upset. Always paranoid." Paranoid. That word was his favorite weapon. The same one he used every time I tried to stand up for myself. Make me feel crazy so he didn't have to feel guilty. But this time, I didn't back down. "No, Brian. I'm not paranoid. I'm done." He laughed. Like a full-on scoff. "Done with what? Helping me raise my kid like some martyr? You act like I owe you for something." That hit harder than anything else. I was stunned silent. I had no comeback for that kind of cruelty. "You used me," I finally whispered. "You let me step into her life. Let her call me mom. And the whole time, you were just keeping me around until something better came along." He didn't deny it. He didn't say a word. That silence told me everything. So I hung up. I cried, of course. Not just for me, but for Ava. I wasn't her real mom. I knew that. But emotionally? Spiritually? I was hers and she was mine. And I had no idea how to walk away from her without hurting both of us. But I had to go. Because staying would have meant losing myself entirely. I packed up the few things I'd left at Brian's place. My toothbrush. Some clothes. A book Ava had begged me to read her. I left it behind. I didn't block him right away. I wanted to see what he would do. If he'd apologize. If he'd even try. Instead, the next day, he posted a picture of himself and Tanya. They were sitting in a booth at a restaurant, clinking wine glasses. Caption: "Cheers to new beginnings." That was it. I blocked him then, phone, socials, everything. But the worst part? A week later, I got a letter. Not from Brian. From Ava. She'd drawn me a picture. It was of her and me holding hands, standing in front of her school. There were little stick hearts over our heads. And she'd written in careful little kid handwriting, "I miss you. Are you still my mom?" I broke. I sat in my kitchen, holding that paper like it was made of glass, sobbing like I hadn't in years. Because I didn't know what to tell her. I wasn't allowed to see her now, Brian made that clear. And legally, I had no claim. No rights. No way to even explain myself. I wrote back. I told her I loved her. That I always would. That just because grown-ups sometimes make messy choices, it doesn't change what we had. I told her to be brave. To keep being kind and smart and wonderful. I didn't sign it, Mom. I signed it with my first name. And a heart. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. And that was when it really hit me, this wasn't just about a breakup. It was about the fallout no one prepares you for when you love someone else's child like your own. When you build a life in someone else's house, on someone else's terms. I hadn't just lost a boyfriend. I'd lost a daughter. After I sent that letter to Ava, I didn't expect to hear anything back. I thought Brian would intercept it. Or throw it away. Or maybe even read it himself just to see if I'd mentioned him. But 2 weeks later, I got another envelope in the mail. This time, it wasn't Ava's handwriting. It was her teacher's. Inside was a note that said Ava had brought my letter to school. She'd cried during quiet reading time and asked her teacher for help writing back. The teacher, bless her heart, said she knew she probably wasn't supposed to get involved, but after seeing what Ava drew and hearing how much she missed me, she couldn't just ignore it. The drawing was of a giant heart with 3 stick figures inside, me, Ava, and her teacher. She wrote, "Thank you for loving me. I know you are not here, but I feel you in my heart. My teacher says love doesn't go away just because someone leaves." I must have sat with that letter in my lap for 20 minutes, staring out the window, just letting it all wash over me. This tiny human, who I didn't give birth to, somehow made me feel more like a mother than I ever thought I could be. And in that moment, I realized something. Even if Brian had cut me out, even if I wasn't legally or biologically connected to her, what Ava and I had was real. It wasn't pretend. It wasn't dependent on Brian's permission. But I also knew I had to fully let go, for her sake and mine. So I wrote back one last time. I told her she was brave and strong and would always carry a piece of my heart with her. I told her it was okay to love more than one person, and that it didn't mean anything was wrong or broken. I reminded her to keep drawing, keep asking questions, and never stop being curious and kind. And I said goodbye. Not because I didn't love her anymore. But because I had to protect her from the mess her dad had created. From the confusion of seeing me pop in and out of her life when I had no control over whether I could stay. After that, I moved. I didn't run, it wasn't like that. But I needed a new zip code. New coffee shop. New everything. For too long, I'd built my routines around Brian and Ava. Their schedules. Their needs. Their orbit. It was time I created one of my own. It wasn't easy. I'd wake up some mornings thinking I still needed to pack a snack for Ava's field trip or pick up dinner for Brian on the way home. It was like muscle memory. My body kept going through the motions long after the relationship had ended. But over time, things got quieter. Less chaotic. There was peace in the stillness, even if it was laced with sadness at first. Brian tried to call once. From a different number. I let it go to voicemail. He left some vague message about tying up loose ends, and how much Ava missed me. But I could hear it in his voice. It wasn't about Ava. It was about control. About seeing if he still had a hold on me. He didn't. I deleted the message and blocked the number. Weeks turned into months. One night, I was at the grocery store, reaching for a box of cereal when I heard a little girl giggle behind me. For a second, my heart dropped. The sound was so much like Ava's laugh, I almost turned around and said her name. But it wasn't her. Just another little girl and her mom walking past. And instead of breaking down, I smiled. Because that laugh reminded me of something good. Something real. Something I had the privilege of experiencing, even if it was only for a chapter of my life. People talk a lot about toxic relationships. About the damage, the trauma, the red flags. But they don't always talk about the parts you miss. The sweetness buried under the pain. The good days that make it so hard to walk away. The little people, like Ava, who never asked to be caught in the middle. Loving her wasn't the mistake. Letting him dictate the terms of that love was. If I could go back, I'd still love her. I'd still show up. Still tie her shoes and read her stories and help her learn how to braid her hair. I just wouldn't lose myself in the process. Now, I'm rebuilding. I've got a small apartment, a job I actually like, and a growing circle of people who know me, not just who I was in someone else's life. I've learned to recognize love that comes with open hands, not closed fists. I've learned to ask better questions early on. And most importantly, I've learned that walking away isn't weakness. It's strength. Especially when you're leaving behind a version of yourself that settled for less. Brian once told me I was too much. Too emotional. Too intense. Too invested. But now, I know the truth. I wasn't too much. He was just not enough.